we'll go ahead and get started just to try to get things kind of moving. We are taping this, so if there's something that you miss or, wow, that's, I had a lot of information thrown at me all at once, you'll be able to go back. We'll have this posted hopefully in the next couple days on our website. And most of this information, we'll kind of talk about this as we get going in the slideshow here, is going to be accessible through Google Classroom. So students are very just knowledgeable of working in Google Classroom with their teachers, and instead of having information in several different spots, we decided to put everything in one spot in a Google Classroom. And parents, you can be invited as an advisor by your student so that you can access that information as well on Google Classroom. So we have some handouts, but we kind of limited them this year because it's all going to be electronic, so we're trying to save some trees there and to be honest, save a little bit of money by not having to print out a bunch of stuff. But if your student, for the stuff that does need handed in, if you don't have a printer or you're having trouble printing that, they can print stuff out here as well in the media center. They print right out to the front copy machine there, correct? I think that's how it all works for students. I'll try to refer to you all the time since I'm just looking around for students that I know and recognize. But there's a copy machine that they can print to out there. So we'll go ahead and get started. Counselors here at the school, we're very fortunate to have 4 counselors. We split them up by the end of the alphabet, or by the alphabet. So Mrs. Rains is A through F. She wasn't able to be here tonight. Mrs. Lakins works with students, last name is G through L. She's in the back here. Mrs. Colbo's up front here. She works with students M through R. And I'm Mr. Addington, work with students S through Z. Probably one of our most important team members would be Mrs. Norman, who works in our office. The secretary in the front there is just been an incredible addition to our team the last couple of years. We do miss Mrs. Gamoff, who has been kind of the staple and been here for so many years. But Mrs. Norman has filled that role very well, and also filled the candy bowl very well in the front of the office there. She always is out of her pocket, and I throw her a little, she'd probably be mad at me that I said that, but she fills that candy bowl every day, and it's just so awesome to see the relationships and just the students feeling comfortable coming in and talking to her and us and stuff like that. So that actually worked out really well. It was a good move on her part. Mrs. Knapp's our principal, working with Mr. Taylor, our assistant principal, and then Mr. Bailey kind of splits roles there between the athletic department and assistant principal. So that's how you would contact us for the phone numbers. We're basically our extensions start at 5210, right? 5210, 11, 12, and 13. Just go straight down there on our extensions, and then our emails are all first initial, last name, and then at highlandschools.org. But that's all on the website as well. So we're going to try to keep this to about an hour, probably end up going over a little bit. Mrs. Lakin's supposed to cut me off if I start talking too much, and I appreciate her doing that. But here's what we're going to cover in that hour tonight. We're going to do just a basic overview. I'm going to obviously start. I'll be talking about kind of the procedure for Highland, what we have here as far as the paperwork and kind of our procedure of turning things in and getting everything set up from Highland's viewpoint. We'll talk about those deadlines. Those deadlines are very important. I know we really try to be very generous on our deadlines, and we tend to have a lot of soft deadlines. I sometimes wonder if we're not doing people a service there, because there are deadlines that really just, and this is one of them, we'll talk about here in a little bit, that April 1st deadline. You just have to meet that April 1st deadline. In the colleges, and this is what happens to our seniors, you apply to Ohio State, they have a November 1st deadline. If you don't hit that November 1st deadline, you get put into a different pool of applicants, and you're not eligible for any scholarships or anything. So those deadlines are important. So I always say, yeah, April 1st is the first deadline here we're going to talk about. I know it's in the spring, but you can always turn stuff in before. You don't have to wait till April 1st. to turn it in, because then it usually becomes April 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and after that. So you can definitely turn things in before. There's no harm or penalty for doing that. We'll talk about how to apply, the additional resources that are going to be on the Google Classroom there, and then we'll have our guest speakers. We have University of Akron here tonight and Tri-C. They're going to talk about more from the university standpoint, kind of an overview of how this program works and how it's set up, and then a little bit more specific to Akron, because since Akron and Tri-C are our two biggest schools that students attend, so that's why we asked them to be here. That's why they agree to be here and talk to our students. They're not the only ones, but those two schools make up, it's got to be close to 85–90% of our CCP students. And then the other 5 or 6 schools, there's just like a student here or there. But they will be able to talk and kind of go over things more specific from their institution. So College Credit Plus in general is a statewide program. It's governed by the state of Ohio, so we all have rules, guidelines that we have to follow there. It really was kind of set up so that students could take courses at the collegiate level, a college course, and also get high school credit for it. And it really started out kind of initially to try to get students, this was back in the PSEO days, it really started, in the 80s, I think, was probably late 80s, 89. So this has been around for a while, but it was really for a lot of some of the schools in the kind of rural areas that just didn't have a lot of the advanced classes, or maybe didn't offer a calc class, or maybe didn't offer a French class or something like that, or didn't offer an advanced science class or something that students just couldn't take, so it offered that to them. Highland here, we're very fortunate. We have the whole range of classes, so students can take our college prep classes, they can take our honors classes, they can take our AP classes, or they can take CCP classes. And those CCP classes and AP classes for most schools are looked at equally. There's a couple exceptions to that rule, but for in general, so if you're thinking about, would I want my student taking 4 AP classes, that's the same thing as taking like 4 CCP classes. So it's these are rigorous college level classes, as they should be. So it's allows students to access that more diverse coursework that maybe the schools don't offer. Like I said, we have 23 AP courses here now. What's the one we're adding next year? We'll have 24 next year with AP, am I allowed to say? Okay, you're going to have to wait until that all gets approved and it comes out in scheduling in the spring, but we're adding one for next year. So I'll just keep my mouth zipped on that one. We'll have 24 next year, and then probably equally amount of honors classes as well. So students can challenge themselves, and the CCP is just, it's almost infinite. I mean, it's not, but it kind of feels that way when we're making all the classes every year in our computer system. But there's just probably thousands of CCP classes that can be accessed. But Greg will talk about too that there's a few that you can have to take at the beginning anyway with the 30. So this was a little kind of came up on a Google Classroom last year. I think it's just kind of a neat little illustration. But we see the student's really at the center of this, and the student needs to drive this boat basically. I know for some parents they're like, I can't even get them to take out the garbage, and you want them to, I've asked them to clean their room now for 3 weeks and it's still a mess. I get that, and I have kids myself. But the student really needs to drive this. They're the ones taking the class. They're the ones that are turning in the work. They're the ones that are communicating with the school. And we were talking about communicating with the university, and the FERPA, which is kind of like HIPAA for medical records first, or medical for the academic records. The schools are going to be talking to that student directly and communicating with them. It's their gig. And when they get on later on, I hear this all the time from parents. Well, I'm paying for the school. I'm paying for their college, but the college won't talk to me about my kids' grades. And they're not going to. They're adults. Unless they want to sign off on that FERPA waiver and give you rights to that, you can't do it. So it's really student-driven. So from the high school standpoint, what our role in this then is just to help the students, inform them of their class schedule kind of here, at the high school, our classes in our building, I can talk about those all day and know them very well. When it comes to an English comp class at Akron, I can talk in general, or at Tri-C, I can talk in general, but they're going to have multiple instructors teaching those, so I really can't talk anything in detail. We will try to help manage the differences in the scheduling, realize that our bell schedule, our calendar are going to be different. Sometimes students don't get a spring break because our spring break is different than the colleges. Sometimes they're going to class here if they're splitting it, which most of our students do. They're going to be taking classes here one week and then have off, and they're going to be taking classes the next week at the college. Finals are going to be different. There's times where we have pep rallies and our bell schedule is different, and students are like, what am I supposed to do? I have a fourth period now just got bumped to the afternoon. How do I go to that class? I have a CCP class. So that's all things that your student has to work out. All the necessary paperwork and everything be for that. For the higher ed, the college, they're responsible for scheduling that coursework, so we don't schedule their college classes. If they're going to take an English comp class, they're going to take an economics class, psychology class, whatever they're going to take, they're scheduling that with that higher ed institution, not us. We put it on their schedule. After they schedule it, we put it here so it shows up on their transcript and everything, but students are doing that directly with the college. Books, that's been changing a little bit. Actually, kind of thankfully, it's becoming a little bit more cost-effective for the high schools. The tens of thousands of dollars that we were paying for books was just, it was getting tough. Here, you add all the other services we had to provide here recently and all the security and mental health service, all stuff, which we're happy to do. Throw in CCP books, and we're like, oh my gosh, it's draining us. So a lot of the schools have started doing some things where they're doing more electronic books. They're a little bit cheaper. They're trying to use similar books, from semester to semester. So it's kind of helping the schools out there a little bit. So we appreciate that. Students going to set those advising sessions with the higher ed. They have to apply just by turning in the paperwork to us that you want to do CCP and filling out that packet that's going to be on that Google Classroom does not apply you to that school. You still have to go on their website. And I think University of Akron gave a paper out here today, and we'll have those resources and links on the Google Classroom as well. But they still have to apply to that school. And then placement tests. If a student's taking an ACT or SAT, that can typically work for placement into those classes. And a lot of times it's kind of what English class they're going to place into, what math class they're going to place into, or they sometimes can use those English numbers for some of the other classes as well. If they haven't taken those, then they're most likely going to take placement tests at that school. And we've seen the same thing with kind of the trend of schools going test optional for college admissions. A lot of times they'll do that, but they still want them to take for placement and sometimes for scholarships and stuff like that as during their senior year and as they graduate, they still have to take those placement tests. So it doesn't get them kind of away from taking those tests completely. That's up to the student to kind of coordinate that with the school. And if they drop a course, it's not just coming to their counselor saying, hey, I really need to drop this sociology course. I'm just so far behind. I'm going to not do so well in it. They have to go to the school and do that. You got to let your counselor know about it, but they got to do it through the school, and they got to make sure that they do it before the deadline where you're not going to have to pay for it. So we'll get to that point here as well with those classes. The schools then send us the grades. We put them on the transcript. That's why a lot of times the transcripts take a little while. It's not like instant. We got to get all those in. We got to get those all actually hand inputted. And then Highland will pay for the course and any of the kind of processed materials after the deadline there. Oh, thanks. So these are kind of the tasks and responsibilities. I think this is a good kind of form here, but you see that person responsible, most of these are going to be the student. Applying to CCP, registering for the test. That's going to be filling out that packet. It's the SAT or the ACT. All of our juniors take the SAT in the spring, and they'll do that again this year. We've done that pretty consistently the last few years. If you're going to take the ACT or the SAT outside of that school day one, you're signed up either on the College Board or the ACT website. Sending those scores, same thing. We do not get sent SAT scores or ACT scores like we used to years ago. We used to get little stickers, and we could pretty easily just make a copy of that, send it over to the school, especially for CCP stuff. ACT and College Board probably cutting costs like everyone's doing, like we're doing. They don't do that anymore, so we don't have those scores that way, so we can't send them over. So we just say, as in general, if you're going to send scores over for CCP or college, you got to go on your ACT account and ask them to send them, or you got to go onto your College Board account and ask them to send them. And then there's a little fee. I think it's up to like $20 now. When I started this, I was saying it was like $8. Now it's like 20. But it's like everything else, I guess. And the SAT that we give, it's the same thing. Even the one in here, we give in school day, you can still put those on there. So here's the trick to that, though, is a lot of times parents and students say, well, I don't know if I'm going to do well. I don't want the school to get those. What if I decide that I want to go test optional? They already have those scores. Well, we've been told by the universities over and over again, we go to the articulation meetings at the beginning of the year, they say if you go test optional, they're not going to look at your scores. They're not going to consider those. If you have a better score that you submitted and say that's the one I want you to look at, that's the one they look at. And they pinky promise us that that's how they do it. Now, we can just go by what they tell us. But so our advice has always been, put down those schools for free because it's going to cost you, quite a bit later, and it's probably really not going to make a difference.
Does it matter if you haven't applied yet to
Nope.
those schools?
Nope. They'll have it in there. It'll sit there for years. If you never apply, they're not going to. They won't access it. But once you do, then they apply. Then they would have it. Every once in a while, it happens with the transcript. A student asks us to send a transcript. We send it over, and then they never apply. Well, then the transcript just kind of sits there. So it's really not going to hurt for the school to have that ahead of time. That that communication is key. Your student really needs to check email. Your student really needs to check email all the time. That's a problem we have here with students, and it's in the schools, and it kind of goes over into the colleges too. That's how they're going to communicate with you. So you got to keep checking that email, and they got to log on to their class and work on that. So that communication really goes between the student and that instructor there, and their advisor. Mr. Landis would be doing all the stuff ahead of time. They have a couple. They're kind of Greg heavy over there at the University of Akron. So like the way it works there is Mr. Landis, Greg Landis, works with all the students before they get accepted and through all the application process and all that. Then once the students are there and have started the CCP, then Greg Derringer kind of takes over from there. And then the other advisors that they work with as far as getting the classes and everything. So, but again, it's that student doing that. Registering is going to be the student and that college counselor. High school courses, that's us. So we're going to ask that students fill out in the spring a full course load as if they're going to be here full time. We're still doing that, right? Because here's what kind of gets into a little pickle is then in the fall, we're cleaning all that up, and students that are taking all these CCP classes now are dropping all those English classes that we thought they were going to be in, or they're dropping all the social studies or classes or whatever it might be. So we've tried to kind of come up with a formula and predict how many students are going to do that so that we have the right resources here. And like this year, and it ended up working out, we predicted correctly, we moved a science teacher from the high school to the middle school. So we're -1 in the science department here because we saw that we could cut some corners there. From a business standpoint and the school standpoint, I get it. From our standpoint and us trying to give our students everything we can give them, we didn't like it at all. But a science teacher got moved, so we're -1. So now we're seeing our numbers a little bit higher in science classes, but all those predicted numbers were correct. So we're not too much, but probably more than what we like to see. But we're tightening our belts just like everybody else is, I guess, with resources and trying to maximize how we use those. So you turning that schedule in the spring is what I'm getting at is so very important. Our schedule is student driven. We take all those requests and then we figure out how many sections, everything we need. We we don't just say we're going to have this many sections of the class, and once it's full, try again next year. We're going to make sure we have all those classes. So that schedule and those requests are very important. Coordinating your high school and college, that's going to be us, the counselors, and your student. That's so they don't end up with 2 English classes. The big point there is they need to follow their high school schedule in Power School until it's changed. So if they're looking on there and they're seeing, I still have Honors Brit Lit, one of our 12th grade honors English classes, and they're like, but Mr. Harrington knows that I'm in English Comp 1 this year. He's going to go ahead and take that off of there. I'm not looking for those things at the beginning of the year. I might come across it later, but those students need to communicate with their counselor, hey, I'm still in this Honors Brit Lit class. I shouldn't be in there because I'm in this English class here at Tri-C. Oh, great, thanks for pointing that out. We'll take you out. But they need to communicate that with us. Because if something happens where we need to find out where students are quickly, we're going to think they're there in that English class. So make sure that the communication again. Navigating the CCP platform, that's going to be the student. And then anything that's going on with their course, they're going to need to, again, initiate that communication. So how to apply? Well, thankfully for all of you that are here, you did the first step. You're here for this meeting. We are going to, again, they're audio taping this. They're going to sync it up with the slides here. So if anybody's listening to this later, thanks for listening to it at this time. But you're going to join that Google Classroom, and then the student can add the parent as the advisor. In that Google Classroom is going to be the CCP packet. Hey, I'm going too long, you're right. CCP packet that's going to go through all the forms that need turned in. They're going to need to apply through the college's website. University of Akron is going to have their CCP portal to go through. Tri-C will have theirs separate. And then complete all that assessments, if it's the ACT, SAT, or those tests for placement. Complete required next steps, communicate with the student. And then there's an orientation meeting, usually takes place over the summer. And then they're going to coordinate that CCP schedule with us, usually in August. So that's one of the things that students and parents are kind of like, you got to wait till August? We do, because we don't know what our high school schedule is going to be until August. We're working on tweaking that all summer long with all those student requests and everything that's changing coming in and new students and all that. So they need to come in before Highland starts, before the college starts, and we need to sit down with each one of those CCP students and make sure that their schedules are good. In that CCP packet, there's going to be a letter of intent. That is so important. That is going to be due by April 1st. April 1st, I believe, is a Tuesday after spring break. So it's not going to be on spring break, it's right after. But my advice is get it in before that. Don't wait till the Tuesday after spring break. We all know what coming back from spring break and vacations and all that stuff looks like. So please get that in before. That allows them to potentially participate in CCP. It's not obligating them to do that. There's a permission slip that talks about the mature content. You have to realize these are college classes. It's kind of a PG-13-ish, not all. Most of them are probably more the G-rated high school type classes as far as the content. Some are more or PG, some are more PG-13. Every once in a while, they're in with adult students. So, what kind of stuff is going on as far as the talk and the discussions and things like that. So just something to consider. So that mature content form is just saying, realize that these are college classes. The information acknowledgement form, you'll see that in there. That's basically just kind of making sure that everybody's on the same page. There'll be stuff that you're going to check there and acknowledge that you understand. And then if you're applying to Akron, there's a signature page that you'll do. If you're applying to Tri-C, you don't need that signature page. There's another way that we authorize classes through the authorization to attend form, and that's all kind of explained in that Google Classroom. So there's that letter of intent for deadlines, April 1st. Again, non-binding. Please turn that in ASAP. We'd love to have 100% of the students signed up tomorrow and turn that form in tomorrow and to the counseling office there. We know that's not going to happen, but please do that as soon as possible. And again, that doesn't obligate you. That's non-binding. Check for the deadlines from the schools, and it's going to be different from Akron to Tri-C to Kent to Cleveland State. Everybody has a little different deadline, so it's up to the individual schools to do that, so make sure you're paying attention to that and how that all works. And then complete that CCP packet and get that into us. We say, definitely have that in before April 1st. Again, no harm or no foul to get that in, well before that. So then once you're in CCP, the Google Classroom is going to guide the students through these steps. So going to there, placement testing, registering for courses, complete the CCP verification process at Highland. That's where you can give a screenshot of your courses, just to kind of give a heads up to your counselor on the course that you plan on taking. Again, this is probably going to be over the summer. We're here for most of June, not here much at all over July, and we're here for most of August. So if you're doing this in July, so we might not be as easy to catch. But go ahead and send us the emails. You're going to still turn in that PowerSchool request form and turn all your courses in here. And you're going to follow that until it's changed. So that's why they need to meet with us. And then if you have to drop a class, you need to communicate very closely, because that can impact athletic eligibility and the number of credits that you're taking, and can also impact graduation timelines. So those are two very important things there. So that's, the intent form we'd love to have right away. Packet, don't need to do right away. So I'm going to turn this on over to Greg Derringer, who's going to talk about overview, and then also a little bit more about University of Akron in particular.
Okay, and what I'll do is some of the information will just be a recap of what Mr. Addington has already covered. So some of the things I'll just kind of fly right through as we kind of go through that. But one thing that is important to remember is the College Credit Plus program. This is literally legislated by the state of Ohio. So much of what is covered is actually written into Ohio law, either in our revised code or our administrative code. So much of what I'll kind of talk about at the beginning here is some of the policies, procedures that are outlined by the state of Ohio. So you already heard just the premise of the program. So we refer to it as dual credit because College Credit Plus is allowing a qualified student, and I don't think this was mentioned, technically it's all the way down to 7th grade. To be very, very honest, at all of our higher ed institutions, we have very few middle schools who are participating. We have over 2,300 students at the University of Akron. I think I have 5 middle school students total that are participating, and you'll hear why when I talk about the eligibility here in a little bit then. So the big majority of students who are participating are typically juniors and seniors in high school, although it is open to all grade levels down to the 7th grade. But the premise is you're taking a college class, and then that college class transfers back to the high school and also applies to high school credits. So that's why it's referred to as a dual credit program. You heard Mr. Addington say your tuition and fees technically paid for through state funding. So basically, real quick summary, what the state does is they take some of the money that normally comes to Highland schools here and they transfer it to whichever university the student's attending to contribute to their tuition expenses at that university. And then Highland Schools is paying for the textbooks for any students who are participating in the program. So from a student and a family perspective, you can really think of CCP pretty much like a scholarship opportunity because tuition fees, textbooks are going to be covered through the participation in the program. From an academic perspective, the biggest benefit to the program is it is allowing the student to get some college credits done and out of the way so that down the road when they are graduating from high school, it's going to help them minimally to stay on track to complete their future college degree, if not even accelerate it. And I'll give you a very extreme example and then the reality. So extreme example, at all of our institutions, I know at Tri-C they've had students over the years earning associate's degrees. At Akron, typically each year we have students earning associate degrees. We have even had, and it was actually a Highland student, earn a bachelor's degree. That is not normal. Most students at the same time as they're graduating from high school have approximately about 20 total college credits at the same time as they're earning their high school diploma. So the students are getting, on average, a little bit more than the equivalent of one full college semester, close to almost one full college year, because a full-time college student should be completing about 30 credits a year. So it really just depends, though, what grade level the student starts in, how many classes they're taking in a given year. But in general, most students are taking just 1 or 2 classes at the same time as they're also taking the other classes back at the high school. So some fees. So tuition fees, textbooks are covered. One thing to keep in mind is if a student is physically going to a college campus, if that college campus does have a parking fee, that is not covered in the CCP expenses. So that would be the student and the family's responsibility to pay that parking expense. Akron, for sure, we do have a parking fee if you're coming to the Akron campus. Tri-C colleagues, parking fee, no parking fee at Tri-C. Kent State, I know the Kent main campus does have a parking fee as well. So it would be dependent on that institution if there is a parking expense if the student is driving themselves. Oftentimes students do not have driver's license yet, so they are going to be carpooling or potentially getting dropped off and picked up by a parent or a family member. So if that's the case, then you wouldn't have to worry about the parking expenses, though. So one of the few upfront expenses. Another potential expense is related to what happens in the class. If the student passes all their classes successfully, absolutely no financial penalty. The state rule, though, is if a student does not complete a class, and there are 2 ways to not complete a class. First way is by failing a class by earning a letter grade of F. Highland Local Schools has the authority to bill the student for that failed course, because what's happened at that point is they've funded that student's participation for failing a course. So they have the authority to request reimbursement. Same thing happens if a student withdraws from a course after the drop period of the student's participation. This is the same for every college or university that a student is participating at. If they're in a full semester class during the regular school year, the first 2 weeks is always the drop period. Think of it, that is your grace period. If a student drops a class during that time frame, no financial responsibility, and that college class is going to be totally removed from their college schedule, which in essence removes it also from their high school schedule. So there are some ramifications if a student does not complete a class or by failing or withdrawing. You already heard about the intent deadline. This is probably one of the most important takeaways from this evening. Even if you are just interested in College Credit Plus, you do have to have that intent to participate form on file with the school here on or before April 1st. This is just showing your intent. So if the students change their mind, it is non-committal, so it's not binding that you have to absolutely participate in College Credit Plus. But if you do miss this deadline, the district can actually decide to not allow funding for that student's participation for the entire upcoming year. So this is for the entire upcoming year, and then the intent form does have to be submitted each year that the student is participating. So this is something that's going to be renewed each year with the school district. So here's the steps to participate. Mr. Addington kind of covered some of these already. The first one, though, is that you have to meet what the state refers to as eligibility. Once that's determined, you're going to apply to the college or university that you're participating at to meet their admissions requirements. And then lastly, you're going to formally register for classes. So Mr. Addington kind of covered each of these respectively, but let's talk about eligibility a little bit more in depth. So the state a couple years ago determined, hey, we want to make sure that this is standardized all throughout the state. So regardless of the college or university that the student's attending, we want to ensure it's going to be the same standards that the student is evaluated on. So if the student is in high school and has already established a high school GPA, or I guess technically, even if it's a middle school student that has had the opportunity to take a class for high school credit, which in essence would count towards this as well, the state says if that student has at least a 3.0 unweighted cumulative GPA, and cumulative meaning their overall GPA, they automatically meet eligibility to participate in CCP. So if you've got that 3.0 unweighted high school GPA, you're going to qualify for admission at the different universities. So it's the same for Akron as it is for Tri-C or any other universities that you may be considering.
You mean not honors?
Unweighted, not honors, so on a 4.0 scale. Most of the students are way beyond that, so in most cases the university is not going to request that separately anyways. But if the student is close, they may request it because there is another way that a student can qualify based on GPA. So let's say they're not at that 3.0 threshold. The state says if you have at least a 2.75 up to a 2.999, then it goes to that individual college or university to evaluate the transcript and determine if the student has A's or B's in relevant courses. They can also determine eligibility based solely just on the GPA. So that would kick to the university to evaluate that at that time then. So that's your first way to meet eligibility is based on the GPA. Second way is by meeting some type of standardized test score. So we already heard conversation a little bit about ACT or SAT test scores. Those are always acceptable by any of the universities in the state of Ohio. But in addition to that, the college or university may also accept some other type of test or assessment to evaluate the student's eligibility. So for example, at the University of Akron, as a four-year university, we will only accept the ACT or SAT because that is what's used in our evaluation for admissions purposes. Tri-C, absolutely, you guys will accept AccuPlacer. Do you have any other assessment? And ALEX, which is a math placement test. So depending on the college or university, if that student doesn't have that GPA requirement, then you need to confirm with that university what assessments they would then use to evaluate that eligibility. So you can either meet it by GPA or meet it by some type of a standardized test score. Just one other quick thing, as Mr. Addington said, so many of the colleges and universities have now gone to what's called test score optional. Please, test scores are not counted against students. They are used also for course placement. So even though a student may qualify to participate based on their GPA, if they already have taken the ACT or SAT, most cases that is going to exempt them from needing to do additional placement testing through the college or university that they've applied to. So still submit your scores. It's not going to be counted against you. If anything, it's going to be used for course placement purposes. We're encountering that over and over again with students throughout the state of Ohio. Every high school junior takes either the ACT or SAT funded by the state of Ohio now. So you've got test scores on file. Please share them with the universities because minimally it's going to be used for course placement. Okay? All right. Once you meet eligibility, it's cut and dry. You're going to apply to the college or university that you intend to take your college classes through, highlighted in yellow here. Now, I think Highland Schools, if I'm not mistaken, is actually an example that doesn't meet this because I think your students actually can receive external emails to their Highland email address, can't they? Yeah, counselors nodding their heads, yes. High school students, so that's good to know. However, even though that's the case, when you are applying to the colleges and universities, I would still encourage the students, if they have not done so already, to create their own personal email accounts. Parents, please do not put your email address as the student's email on the college application. All of our colleges will have a section that does request parent email addresses, so they're going to be included on there. This is the first example of the students need to start to take ownership and responsibility for completing this college application. Cannot tell you how many times this has happened. At our institution, I'm sure it happens at Tri-C, we receive a college application for CCP. Guess what? The parent's name is on the application. So unless you want to come and take the classes for yourself, I shouldn't say that because some of you may think that's a good idea, but this is the student's college application. There will be sections on there where you can add a parent email address when they're applying. So this is kind of the first sign of major responsibility that's taking place in the process. Minimally, you should at least be sitting down together and completing these applications because, again, I can't tell you how many parents, they're just bulldozing right through this and they're filling out the applications for their students themselves. Students are not even aware that they had an application that was submitted in some cases. So please sit down and have a serious discussion as a family about what this process is going to be so that you're doing this together and the student's already kind of walking through these steps. So that's going to be common. You need an online application to the university. Mr. Addington, thank you for saying turning in your intent form to the school is not a college application. You're formally applying to the university that you're taking your classes. Another thing that's going to be standard, Mr. Addington also said, is a permission slip. I've got another slide where I'll talk about that too, but you're going to need to send in a transcript, and then also there could be some other supplemental forms or things that need completed. So in Akron's materials, you'll see that we have a form called a signature page that is different from the permission slip. So just a quick overview of the permission slip. This is a standardized form by the state. It is mandatory for every college or university to accept this. Both the student and a parent or guardian is signing off on this, acknowledging my student is taking a college level course that could have mature content in it. So, and that mature content will not be altered or changed regardless of the age of the student because 9 times out of 10 students in CCP are minors. So it's not going to be changed. So state says we want everybody to be on the same page with that. Okay? And you could scan it, or even we'll take an image of it too. So whatever method is best, that way you could upload it both places there. Once a student has gone through the formal application process, it's cut and dry. The admissions office at that institution is going to review the student, confirming they meet the eligibility and admission to that university. And then after that, students will receive instructions, and this is where the email is so important. Now at our institution, we will still continue to copy the personal and parent email addresses for a short time until the student is actually enrolled in classes. Once they're enrolled in classes, they are officially a student, and all future communication at that point will only be going to the university's email address. So this is a big shift for students. I know you guys like to receive everything via text message or you're on social media all the time. As a college student, all communication is via email. So it's very, very important you get in the habit of starting to already use that. So in those email instructions from the university, though, it'll tell the students, okay, is there a formal orientation that the student has to attend? Is it just an appointment with a counselor or an advisor? What are those instructions to actually complete the process to formally register for classes? So that's going to be sometime after the student is admitted that they're going to get these instructions that they need to follow through with. So those are your 3 steps then. You're going to meet eligibility, you're going to apply for admission, and then complete registration. Okay? All right, a couple other things here, courses. So I'll kind of fly through some of these here. So the state a couple years ago, you'll notice lots and lots of rules here. They set up a rule that says, hey, when a student is brand new to College Credit Plus, we want to ensure, because so many students in Ohio tend to stay in Ohio, and especially at state universities and community colleges, so we want to ensure at least the first 15 credits are going to be transferable courses. So this is referred to as the level 1 or the first 15 credit rule. So basically what this means is a brand new student to CCP may only take courses that fulfill what's called level 1. So Tri-C as one of our state community colleges, University of Akron as one of the state universities, we have classes that fit into these different categories. Now there also are some subject areas which are acceptable to be taken within the first 15 credits. Those include computer science and information technology, anatomy and physiology, or any foreign languages including sign language. So those are always acceptable technically within the first 15 or even after the student has 15 credits. But let me skip up to the transferable courses. So here in the state of Ohio, the transferable courses are referred to as what's called Ohio Transfer 36, abbreviated as OT 36. Think of it as those are your core subject areas. So if you take English at Tri-C, if you take, which is yours called college writing, your first class? College Comp 1. So English Comp 1 at Akron, College Comp 1 at Tri-C. That fulfills the first writing course within the state system in Ohio, guaranteed to transfer to all of the state schools and community colleges. So there's courses that fit into that OT 36 category. We also have what are called Transfer Assurance Guide and Career Technical Assurance Guide classes. Those are oftentimes a required course in a specific major or career and technical field that if you take those, again, guaranteed to transfer throughout the state system. So the way this works then is students going to be limited to these subject areas within their first 15 credits. Once they have 15 credits done and out of the way, sky's the limit. They're no longer restricted to just those courses in those specified categories.
Credit and grade or just credit?
What's that?
Credit and grade or just credit?
The student has to earn a grade in participation in CCP. So it is going to be a accredited course with a letter grade.
Goes on the transcript and transcript?
Absolutely. Anything you're doing in CCP is always a grade on a college transcript. Yes, state law says it has to be a graded course with an actual letter grade. On your college transcript, transfers back to the high school and calculated into the high school GPA. Yep. So, yep, it is the start of your college transcript. So, stays with you for your life. Non-allowable courses. Now, non-allowable courses, doesn't matter how many credits the student has taken through CCP, these subject areas, state will not pay for them. The state will not pay for any one-on-one privately instructed courses. At most of our institutions, that ends up being private music lessons. So I'll come back to that one in a second. Phys ed is never covered by CCP. Because of that, no-brainer, do your phys ed requirement back at the high school. That is actually not even a college requirement anymore. Back in the day, those of us, do I have any Akron alum in here? Akron alum, we had to take a PE or wellness credit. No longer a thing. None of the state universities have a PE requirement. So students are going to do PE back at the high school. Also remedial courses, those are courses that do not count for college credit. So sometimes based on placement, a student doesn't test into a college level math class based on what their placement scores are. So because of that, that would place them into a remedial or developmental course, not paid for through CCP. The only example that we do allow students to pay for is we have had students request music lessons because their ultimate goal is they're going to go on and become a music major or maybe a music education major to become a music teacher. So that requires that they have to take one-on-one lessons in whatever their instrument is, or if it's voice. Because of that, they can take those courses, but they have to self-pay out of pocket to take those courses, not covered by CCP, okay? As far as courses, a lot of the courses that CCP students take are what we refer to as general education, core classes. So think of it as these are the same subject areas that I need to fulfill my high school graduation requirements. The #1 enrolled course or subject area throughout the entire state of Ohio for CCP, English composition. Something like 85% of the some 60, 70,000 students that do CCP in Ohio each year are taking English composition at some point in their academic career. But most of the core subject areas are what students are taking. Little quick caution here. Because Highland High School, the majority of the students are taking online courses. The days have kind of shifted where we used to have students coming to campuses and taking classes, so students prefer now to take online classes. With the online classes comes a significant amount of responsibility and a significant amount of time management. Here's a good way to think of it. Most college classes are 3 college credits. So if that was an in-person class, that college class would meet 3 hours per week, meeting for class time. For an online class, that's kind of all flipped. But the way to think of it is you still need 3 hours per week just for covering the lecture content. That lecture content is oftentimes delivered in different ways. Sometimes the professor has a recorded lecture. Sometimes the student's just following through presentations or PowerPoints, or they're just reading materials. But it still is probably going to end up being about 3 hours of work per week just for the kind of the content. Outside of that is also homework, assignments, reading your textbook. So a 3-hour class, even though it's online, could be 6 to 9 hours of coursework per week. So where we see students fall into difficulty is they say, oh, I'm just going to do this in the evening when I have this free time. How many students are also in sports, are also in band and choir, have a part-time job? So that 6 to 9 hours can be very challenging for some students. So if a student is considering an online class, they really need to consider what the time management is going to look like, how much time they're going to have available to dedicate to that, as well as are they a good communicator? So if there's something they don't understand in an online class, are they confident enough to reach out to the professor and ask for assistance and help if there's things that they need help with? Okay, so enough said about that one there. Some other differences between high school and college classes. Now classes themselves, days are kind of long gone where it used to be where you had a college class and it was just 2 tests and a final and that was it. Most classes are going to have other graded assignments. They might have quizzes and other activities, but probably still less frequently than what a student would be used to in in a high school class. So that is something to kind of expect there. Study time, as you heard me just say with an online class, that also applies to an in-person class that a student can pretty much expect for each hour that they spend on class time, they need at least double the amount of time working on homework and assignments and reading their textbooks. So it accumulates pretty quickly on what the time commitment is going to be. Role of parents, Mr. Addington said this earlier. When a student is taking a college class, parents, unfortunately, you do not have automatic access to view their grades, to communicate with individuals at the university. Now, as the director of the program at Akron, I 100% will always talk to parents. Depends on what the situation is, how much in depth I can go, but I never hesitate to talk to a parent. If you try to contact a college professor, even if you have permission on file from your student, in my experience, you probably have a 50-50 chance of a faculty member talking to you as a parent. Because they do not have to, even if the student has granted that permission. So that's a big shift there in parent responsibilities. As far as accommodations, just real quick, if a student is on an IEP or a 504 plan, that does not automatically carry to the college level. So a student would need to register with an accessibility office at the college, and then they would assess the student's documentation to determine if accommodations are available at the college level. Most cases, they are going to receive something. It's just that it may not be identical to what the accommodations may be at high school. We already heard about the grades earlier. If the student is taking a course in a subject area through the CCP program, and there's a weighted grade in that same subject area here at the school, it will be weighted accordingly when it is calculated into the high school GPA. Academic policy here, this is another state policy. If a student falls below a 2.0, just in their college GPA, so this is college GPA only, that student is going to be placed on CCP probation, so they're still eligible to continue, take one class the next semester, but in that next semester, they've got to get the GPA up over a 2.0, or they are eligible for dismissal or removal from the program. And I kind of understand the state's stance on this. They're trying to prevent students, because this is your college transcript, they're trying to prevent students from digging themselves into a hole so that they're already starting with a poor GPA before they've even graduated from high school. So this one is held to very strictly. The good news is, and I'm sure this is similar at Tri-C, our average GPA for our CCP students is a 3.3 in their college classes. So in most cases, they're earning A's and B's in those college classes.
So you said only if it's an AP equivalent.
No.
It's weighted?
No. Oh, yes, only if it's yeah, back to that. Yeah, only if it's an AP equivalent. If there's an AP equivalent at the school, it'll be weighted.
So if they're
Yeah.
taking English composition, it's not weighted.
It is weighted. They have AP English here at the school. Yeah.
If there's an AP English class that we have, then a CCP English class will be weighted.
Yeah. Yeah, if there's equivalent
But
subject.
it doesn't have to be advanced in college. Okay.
No, because we don't have advanced in college, so it's advanced in high school. Yeah. Okay, real quick, I skipped a slide here, but there is a limit on the number of credits that a student can take. That limit is 30 total credits in the year. That is not just college credits. The state requires us to calculate both high school and college together. So the conversion is, actually I'll go back to that one real quick, 1 high school credit equals 3 college credits, or vice versa. Any college class that's 3 or more credits, when it transfers back to the school, fulfills 1 full high school credit. So think about that kind of quickly here. In 1 semester, because a college class is typically 3 or more credits, student can get a full high school credit by taking a 1 semester college course. So it accumulates a little bit quicker when a student's doing CCP. Here's a typical example of what we see though. So in this example here, the student is taking still at the high school 5 full high school credits, and then through CCP in the fall semester, they're taking 6 credits. Spring semester, they're taking another 6 credits. So if you do the calculation on that, 5 high school credits is equal to 15 college credits. If they do 6 in one semester through the college and 6 the next semester, that's an additional 12 credits. So in that example, the students accumulated 27 total credits. They technically still had at their disposal 30 total credits for the year. So there's different ways students can kind of meet what they have available in their schedule, and each of the universities works very closely with your counselors here at the school to ensure that the students are staying within that limit, because what happens is if a student exceeds the limit, they either have to self-pay for that college course, or they have to make an adjustment one way or the other, either in their high school schedule or their college schedule. And it's pretty challenging to get past that 30 credit limit. Usually when students exceed it, it's because they do start with classes in the summer, which is eligible for CCP. Now, options after high school. So, and we talked about this earlier. This is the start of your college transcript. So whether you're going to stay at the same university where you're doing CCP, or ultimately you plan to transfer elsewhere, you're going to have to share that transcript with any university that you're attending. Now, if you're staying at the same institution, typically, so this is the case at Akron, we do require our students to reapply, because what's happening is in their senior year of high school, that's when students normally are going to be applying for college admission anyways. You're reapplying to change your status from a CCP student to then a degree-seeking student. So it's just that formality of reapplying. Now, if a student is going elsewhere, if they're staying within the state system here in Ohio, so let's say you do take classes at Tri-C or at Akron, and ultimately you want to go to Ohio State, you can use a website called transfercredit.ohio.gov/students, and it's basically a course equivalency guide. So the way it works is when you go to the website, you're going to click on the section that says Credit Transfer Tool, and then this is where you're going to find the search option. So you plug in where you're attending. So I put in, I'm attending Akron. Now I already selected where it says choose subject area. I selected English. That kicks it over to the top right here, and then you simply hit Find Matches. What this does, it lists in alphabetical order all of the community colleges and state universities here in Ohio. So in this example, what I did was I expanded Bowling Green, and you can see if you take English Composition 111 at Akron, it's directly equivalent to WRIT 1110 at Bowling Green. So it's basically a tool you can use to kind of check on equivalencies from one university to another. So just state universities and community colleges here in Ohio. So let's say you're looking at an out-of-state school or a private school. Then you want to use this website called Transferology. This is much, much more comprehensive. Now, a big difference with this website is students do need to create an account first. Once they've created the account, it is free. You can search through this and look at different colleges, universities beyond just the state universities here in Ohio. So now I skipped the search steps here, and I probably should use a private school for this example now, but what I did is left is Akron, right is Ohio State. Very similar to the state website though, it's showing you course for course what those equivalencies are. Even though you can use these websites though, my advice to you is please, please, please get on the phone, talk to admissions offices at any universities you may be considering, especially if you're looking at private schools or out-of-state schools. Each school has their own policies, and in my experience, I've worked with this program now for going on, this is my 30th year at the university. I've worked with CCP and post-secondary for 25 years out of my 30 years. So I've seen everything. I've seen some schools accept 100% of the courses. I've seen some schools accept none of the courses. So please be educated and know what those policies are. Real quickly, I'll finish up with Akron so we can pass it over to Tri-C. Your primary options for classes at Akron are either coming to one of our campuses or taking classes online, which you heard me say earlier, the tendency and trend now for a lot of the Highland students is taking classes online. To meet eligibility, it is identical to what I covered in the previous slide, 3.0 or a 2.75 with special consideration. If a student doesn't have that GPA requirement, by default, they will need to take either the ACT or SAT test. So you see the qualifying scores on there, as well as all that information is on my handout for the University of Akron. So you've got that all right there. I was going to say in black and white, but I'll say it's in blue and gold. So you got it in blue and gold there with all our requirements. Application process, we kind of covered this earlier. Number one most important thing is the online application. And then we do have our own unique form at Akron called a signature page. That requires, similar to the permission slip, a student and a parent signature, but also a school counselor signature. So that's one of the slight differences there. Application deadline is April 15th for summer and fall, and October 15th for spring if a student would want to apply midway through the year. Just remember that April 1st intent deadline, though, is always for the entire upcoming academic year. So if a student misses that, if they wanted to apply for our spring semester in January by that October deadline, they could do so, but if they didn't do the intent deadline at the school, they would have to self-pay to take classes that semester. Test dates here, ACT, SAT, you can also get these all online. Placement testing, just again to reiterate, just because a student is admitted based on their 3.0 GPA doesn't mean that exempts them from potentially needing to do some placement testing through the college or university that they've applied. And then we do require all of our students at Akron to complete an orientation. So those actually start in May and run throughout the entire summer. So the earlier the student applies, earlier they get admitted, the earlier they're going to be attending their orientation program. So I'm going to stop there. I had a couple other slides there. We've covered a lot of those details already. And I'm going to pass it over to Dan to talk about Tri-C. So.
Great. I only have 50 slides. No, I'm kidding. So I'm actually just going to really focus on some of the things that are different about Tri-C compared to the University of Akron, because great job kind of overviewing. And like you said, so much of this is regulated by the state of Ohio. So there really isn't going to be much difference through some of the steps. A couple things that can be tricky about Tri-C is that many of our courses require that English placement. So sometimes what happens is we have students that show up and say, but all I want to do is take general psych. And why can't I just directly register for that? Well, because you're going to be doing a fair amount of writing in that course, you need to have that English placement on file. So sometimes that'll kind of trick students up that in their mind, they're not linked, but in our mind and for our advising folks, they're linked. Other thing that I'll point out, we have a fantastic College Credit Plus staff that works at Tri-Ci's campus. You are not alone in this process. So I think you kind of like see all these slides about eligibility and placement, and that's what our CCP office does all day, every day, right? So what I always kind of encourage folks to do, if you want to do the program, fill out that application, send that high school transcript. We will be able to determine if you're eligible or not and request that additional information. So don't feel like I have to go through all these slides by myself and figure all of this out. We have a very robust CCP support program that will be able to help you out with that. What else? Very similarly, lots of options for our students. So we do have online options. We do have face-to-face options. That would include our Brunswick University Extension Center. So depending on where you are, I'm from the Western campus in Parma, but Brunswick might be a little bit closer for you too if you're looking to do face-to-face. Other thing I'll point out, like Akron stated, a lot of our students are moving to those online classes. Another peculiarity with Tri-C is if you take an entirely online class, you need to interact with the system a prescribed number of times within the first 2 weeks. Otherwise, what happens, we go in and drop you for non-attendance. So just like if you were in a face-to-face class and you didn't show up for the first 2 weeks, we go through and drop those students. And here's what I'll tell you. Enrollment, we can't put you back in those classes. We have to get permission from the faculty member. And it's real hard to get permission from a faculty member to put you back in an online class if you haven't been doing anything for 2 weeks. So that can also be something that throws some of our CCP students off as they think, oh, I'll just go in and do the work whenever, but you need to be reading those syllabi, following those instructions, because you'll get dropped, and then it's just, at that point, it's very hard for us to convince faculty to put you back in those classes.
Just to add to that real quick, Dan, yes, so an online class is not work at your own pace in the sense that there will be due dates and deadlines, and sometimes students think, oh, I can blow it all off and do everything at the end of the semester. They don't work that way.
Correct. Yep. Yeah. So that's all I'm going to really talk about, because again, great job kind of going through the process, kind of doing some of those things, and I don't know about you guys, but I'm kind of ready to get moving a little bit here. So please, if there are any questions, I'll be around. And thanks for having me tonight.
About 15, 20 seconds here. So we just have one slide here. We'd like you to, we want to thank you for attending, obviously. But we have a kind of a way we're hoping to have you do this survey. So if you could take the screenshot of that there to the picture. Anybody that's doing looking at this other times, please do that as well. We're trying to get some feedback on what we can do better, how we can improve this for everyone. Our goal is really to try to give you all the information that you need right out of the gate. So if there are things, and some of this is going to be a matter of going through it, and you're going to be like, oh, okay, now I understand what they were saying there, because it's very different way of attending classes, and it's just something new for most people. But that's really it. So thank you very much. We appreciate you coming out.